Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host Amna Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen. Here on Next Gen, we speak about the issues that we are facing in our world today, current events specifically. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and soon on Apple TV as well. Now, today on NextGen, we will be speaking about an issue that we've hit on a bit before, the issue of climate justice and the climate crisis that we are facing. We talked about it on a bit more of a local level, but today our guest is here to speak to us at a bit more of an international level. Grace Maddrell, a 15-year-old climate and social justice activist from England, the UK. She's from there. She works mainly with the Save Congo Rainforest Campaign and Fridays for Future. Grace is passionate about making sure the world is more equal and just for all people. Thank you so much, Grace, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Grace, I know some of you, if you're coming from Twitter, you might recognize her. She's very prominent on there, and her campaign is always, just blasted on Twitter, which is amazing. But Grace, I want you to talk to us a little bit about how does climate activism, how does that scene look like in the UK?
So in the UK, we have quite a few climate activism groups, but they're all quite different. And then we have branches of like Fridays for Future and various more local campaigns. We don't do strikes and like protests so much as some other countries, partly due to laws around school attendance, etc., etc. And it can tend to be a bit more focused on like big cities like London. So for me, I'm in a town in Somerset, so I'm not so central to like where everything's going on. So for me, it's quite solo, which is why Twitter is really great, because that's where I connect with people. I think there is quite a focus on like a more global look in UK as well, because we don't face too many crises ourselves, because we're quite a privileged country. So for most activists, it's about a more global crisis and hopefully about climate justice, and a more equal world, and those who are like suffering right now from the effects of the crisis.
So you're saying that in the UK, they focus not just on their country, but you feel like a bit more international level.
Yeah, I think, well, for me, that is my focus, and for various other British activists I know, yeah.
And Grace, before we get into your work, I know that your bio is impressive. You've done so much, but before we get into that, I want to talk about what led you to do so much of the work that you're doing at such a young age. Was there a point that you were like, that was the deciding factor that you were going to start advocating and becoming this type of climate activist, or was it gradual? Talk us through that.
So I didn't really have like a one moment where I was like, I have to do this, but I've kind of always cared about various issues, but it sort of came to a head early 2019. I started being like more anxious about it, and I heard about like these protests that were going on. I was like, I might go along. And then I started thinking about the issue a lot more, and I realized like how serious it was. So I started doing some actions. And then I didn't start doing more often until later that year. So it's kind of been a process to take me from being like someone who attends a protest like maybe once a month to someone who's like doing stuff every day and advocating for like equality as well. But yeah, there wasn't like a big moment where I've got to do this.
Where like a light bulb went off type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually really interesting that, you said you started off slow and then gradually you started, doing things day to day. How does, being an activist look like for you day to day? Tell us about that.
So each day I do like a protest for the Congo rainforest. Before the pandemic, that was in the streets. Now it's mostly online. So that's something which is the same every day. Then it depends what's going on. Like if there's a certain day it is, like Earth Day or I don't know, World Oceans Day or something like that, I might do something to acknowledge that, like a YouTube video or a thread on Twitter. And mostly I just generally advocate, like when I see issues of inequality or like the climate crisis and effects of it, I will just speak up about it on Twitter mostly, or in wherever I am.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the internet really plays a big role in a lot of you connecting perhaps with other activists. How has the internet been able to help you other than that?
So obviously it's a platform where you can actually share your voice, and where I am, there's not much of a platform for me to do that in real life very often. So I use Twitter and YouTube and so on as a way to get my message out there and be visible, and and also to connect a lot with people and have this network. And I wouldn't be able to do very much activism, certainly in the middle of a pandemic, without being able
Right.
to use apps like Twitter and things. So yeah, it plays quite a big role.
Yeah, I feel like with the pandemic, much of our things have been webinars or, like you said, Twitter storms and things of that sort. It's been very difficult to do
Yeah.
protests and rallies. Totally agree with you. But tell us about your work with the Save Congo Rainforest to people who might not even be familiar with what's going on. Can you explain that to us?
So it basically started in November 2019. I noticed this activist called Vanessa Nakate. She's Ugandan. And she was doing protests for the Congo rainforest because there were fires there which were threatening it, which no one was talking about. And that was partly because it was in Africa. But it's the second largest rainforest in the world. And, it makes sense to be talking about it because it has global implications if something happens to it. Aside from the fires, then there's also been a lot of deforestation and injustice to the indigenous communities in the Congo rainforest and so on. So it was like a really important issue. And when I noticed this, I was like, not only is it a really important issue, this person is doing this basically all alone and she needs some support. So I started doing it as well. And from there, it kind of took off, and how there are quite a few of us. And I also do quite a lot of like organizing with the campaign when there is something going on. Recently, we haven't been doing so much, but when there is, then I get involved with that. So it kind of started as one person doing these solo protests, and then it's become quite a few people all over the world, including some of my best friends. So that's really good.
I think that's amazing. It really shows you the power of activism, and not just activism, like you said, you're organizing. I think that is one of the biggest, differentiations between people who will just tweet things versus people like you who are actually out there connecting with people. And you talked about the indigenous populations in Uganda as well. Tell us about that. I don't know how many people would be familiar with that.
So I don't know like a huge amount of the details, but obviously there are a lot of people in the area who will be relying on the rainforest. Millions of people, I can't remember the exact figure, rely on the Congo rainforest from both the Democratic Republic of Congo and the obvious countries, and also various countries all around there. And indigenous communities especially will rely on it and live there. And then there's deforestation and companies, especially from the West, coming in and destroying it. And so that's destroying their homes, their lives, and a lot of their culture. So that's a huge factor in fighting for the forest. And I think people quite often think it's just about like the trees or the birds there or whatever, but actually huge amounts of people rely on the forest as well.
That's a really interesting point that people generally think of the resources and the mammals, the animals, and things of that sort, but there are actual people, right? Indigenous populations that are being ignored as well. I think that's a very important part to take in. But Grace, one of the things that kind of shocked me the most about you is after reading all of the work that you're doing, that you're 15 years old. That is amazing. Have you ever felt your age was a setback or a challenge to some of the work that you're doing?
Mostly it isn't, because actually most activists right now are youth, and it's been really empowering to be part of this generation, which, there's so many incredible people speaking up. And so I'm sort of really proud of that. Occasionally there have been issues that's often involved with the fact that my age makes me potentially like vulnerable on Twitter and stuff to certain things. So that's been a problem sometimes. And also being a bit trodden on by adults in campaigns who think that because they're adults, they
They
should
know
control the
better.
campaigns.
Right.
uh, so some of that has been a bit of an issue, and obviously sometimes not being able to go and do certain things because I just can't, especially when I started, I was 13. So that was a lot more, yeah,
Right.
a lot more of an issue then. So yeah, but on the whole, it hasn't been too much of a block to being an activist, really.
Yeah, and to the adults that, will look down on you and things of that sort, I think they should know that you're also the co-founder of Solo But Not Alone, which is amazing. I don't want to tell the audience too much about that campaign. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about Solo But Not Alone?
So that started back in late 2019, early 2020 as a way to support solo strikers. Yeah, so I'm a co-founder with 3 other activists, one in Northern Ireland, one in also in the UK, but in sort of Scotland and England, and another who wasn't actually a co-founder, but she works with us now in Australia. So it's been, yeah, we were all solo strikers, and we were like, this is kind of really disempowering being like alone. So we really wanted to support people. Recently, we haven't done very much actually, because we've been like, had a few technical issues, but it's basically to support and share the voices of people who are protesting completely alone.
Sure. I think that, you said that with the rise of young activists, obviously there's so many of us, and sometimes it is disempowering and it feels lonely, even though there are so many of us, we might not be as well connected as we hope to be. Grace, let's continue talking about your work and the work that you're doing for the climate right after our short break. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and on Apple TV as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NextGen. I'm here with Grace, who is a 15-year-old climate activist based in England. She's been doing phenomenal work. And Grace, let's continue talking about that work. Another campaign, another project that you started is called Standing Up. I know that you are a writer and you've been connecting with activists in order for to launch this campaign. And now it's on its way. It started. Tell us about Standing Up.
So that was basically, I decided to start interviewing some other activists because I knew I had something of a platform and I really wanted to share that with other activists for various issues. So a while back, before I'd even properly formed the project, I asked an activist if she would like to be interviewed, and she said yes. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And the name Standing Up is just like, people standing up for issues. And I just started to write these pieces on Medium, which is an app where you can write your own articles and interview people and sort of share their work. And I've done that for activists for Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus rights, equality in a variety of ways, and the climate crisis and mental health. So far, I've only actually published 4 interviews, but I've got some more in the
Coming
works.
up.
Yeah.
And what has been the initial or the primary response to Standing Up? I think mine personally was, that is so cool, right? Like, I want to read the stories, and the things that you're covering are so diverse, but I want to know, what was the response of other people as well?
It was mostly quite positive, and all the activists I interviewed were really happy to be interviewed and have their stories put out there. Some of them had more followers than me, but it was a way for me to share it with a different audience, and some of them had less, and it was a way to boost their voices. and I think people were mostly very positive about it, especially the like acquaintances and friends of the people I interviewed. I would like it to get more traction because I feel like some of them people will just look at it and they're like, that's cool, but they don't actually bother to read it, which I know I do sometimes myself with articles. But so I would like it to be like more of a thing and people actually go and look rather than just say, I'm going to retweet that. But I think on the whole, the reaction has been very positive, and it's been really nice to work on as well.
Yeah. And what about the response to the rest of the work that you do, right? The Save Congo Rainforest and Solo But Not Alone and the other campaigns that you have the responses been primarily from young people or what, what group are we looking at there? And has it been positive?
Mostly, obviously, there are trolls and there are haters and there are weirdos on the internet. That's kind of a given. So there's been all that. But mostly it's been quite positive, and quite a few of my friends in the campaign say that I inspired them to start. And yeah, so that's quite nice to think that I have inspired some people. I also think I'm being overestimated sometimes, but and yeah, it has been a lot of young people who've joined, but there are also some older people, which isn't always a positive thing, but can be a positive thing. And mostly it's been quite positive. I do get the odd, hate or someone being like, why don't you care about the people? Why is it just about the forest? Which, as I already mentioned, it's definitely about both.
Right.
But on the whole, yeah, it's been quite positive and there hasn't been too much, hate or difficulties.
And you are 15 years old. What is your goal for the future? How do you hope to continue this?
Well, I think as long as there is injustice in the world, I'm going to keep standing up for things because I can't just look and see that that's happening and just ignore it or say, oh, that's really bad, but not do anything. I kind of like that doesn't work for me. And so I don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. I really hope that we're going to be able to solve some of these issues or at least get action on them to make them better. I don't believe that everything is going to be fixed in the world by the time I'm old, but I hope that maybe we won't be facing like an existential crisis or a load of inequality and oppression. I hope that that will change, and I hope that I can be part of changing that. Other than that, I have more personal aims. Like I want to be like a professional writer, which technically I already am on the verge of being, but like full time, properly being a writer rather than like, oh, I've got this book, but I've also got all these other things. And yeah, I don't really know where I'm going, but I really hope that I won't have to be so much of an activist because I hope that these issues get fixed or at least there's some action taken.
I think we all can, kind of just nod our head along with that and hope that, we don't have to have so many activists at the end of the day because we want these issues ultimately to be resolved. But Grace, what is your advice to young people who, like you, may be inspired by you, want to get involved? Where should they start?
Well, I think you can kind of start anywhere because obviously it depends on the issue and the groups you want to get involved with. And basically, if you want to be an activist, you can be, because it doesn't have to be, getting out and organizing a massive march. Like for some people, that isn't even possible due to their countries, their regimes, maybe they have a disability, maybe they have another reason why they can't do that. But even if you're just online and you're speaking up and you're maybe writing articles or you're doing art to be an activist, there are so many ways to be an activist. There is not a right way to be an activist. So you can start anywhere and just go with like your strengths and what you're really passionate about. And if you want to specifically get involved with campaigns that like I know about, you can easily find them on Twitter. Most campaigns you will be able to find on the internet. And maybe you'll find something in your local area as well, and just like go along or join or just try to get involved in some way, even if you just message them and say like, do you need any help with this action? Can I join you? How do I join you? There's always a place to start, and whatever you do, whether you're part of a group or you're working solo, there's always some way to be an activist. So just do it.
Grace, I like that you said that there's not one way to be an activist. I think maybe some people feel intimidated by that title, or maybe they don't have a large following, so they don't feel that they're able to. But like you said, start anywhere. There's no one place that is the right place to start. I think that's very powerful for our young people who want to get involved. But before we end today, Grace, this has been, I've been able to learn so much about your work, and you are inspiring. I don't think people, you are underrated, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You're amazing. But Grace, before we end, what is your one message that you would want our audience to take away from today?
I think it's hard to choose one message because obviously there are going to be so many facets and one very important thing is what I just said, that like if you want to get involved with activism, no matter how old you are, where you come from, what your identity is, you just can, and there is no one way to be. And also, if you haven't, like, obviously not everyone has to be an activist, but if you haven't, is there some way you could speak up? Is there some way you could get involved or support someone who is speaking up? Like, is there something you can do? And if there is, which there almost certainly is, just do it and be part of making the world a better place.
Thank you so much, Grace. I think that was a powerful and you chose the right thing to say, that we all collectively have to work together in order to make the world a better place, right? It's not just one activist, one organizer. It's all of us coming together. Thank you so much, Grace Maddrell, for being with us today. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. Hopefully we can take Grace's advice and start anywhere, whether that be local or at a larger level, to help with this crisis. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.